Victoria Chun followed her janitor home on a Friday afternoon and watched a 9-year-old girl run into his arms like he was her entire world. An hour later, the CEO of Sterling Tech sat in her car crying so hard she couldn't breathe because her own daughter didn't even know if she'd show up for Thanksgiving. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Victoria Chun had built her empire on precision. Every decision, every meeting, every dollar spent was calculated, measured, and justified. At 38 years old, she was the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 technology company, a fact that both the business magazines and her critics never let her forget. Her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Tech Tower was a monument to her success, all glass and steel and spectacular views of the city below. But on this particular Friday afternoon at exactly 3 o'clock, Victoria wasn't looking at the view. She was looking at her janitor. His name was Marcus Webb, though she had only learned that detail 2 weeks ago when she'd finally bothered to read the nameplate on his uniform. For 3 years, he had been a ghost in her building, one of those invisible people who appeared after hours to empty trash cans and polish floors. She passed him in the hallways sometimes, always with her phone pressed to her ear or her eyes locked on her tablet. He would step aside to let her pass, his cart squeaking softly, and she would sweep by without a glance. He was part of the infrastructure, as unremarkable as the elevator or the climate control system. But 2 weeks ago, something had shifted. Victoria had been working late, the building nearly empty, when she'd heard singing. It was a rich, gentle voice coming from down the hall, singing something soft and old-fashioned that she couldn't quite place. She'd looked up from her laptop, irritated by the interruption, ready to send a complaint to facilities management. Then she'd seen him through the glass wall of the conference room, mopping the floor with slow, deliberate strokes, his lips moving with the melody. There was something in his face, a profound sadness mixed with an inexplicable peace that had stopped her cold. She'd watched him for a full minute before he'd noticed her stare and the singing had died in his throat. He'd given her a small, apologetic nod and moved his cart to another floor. She'd forgotten about it by Monday, or at least she'd told herself she had, but then she'd started noticing him. Not consciously, not deliberately, but her eyes would find him in the lobby when she arrived each morning or crossing the parking garage when she left at night. He always arrived at exactly 2:45 in the afternoon, clocking in for his 3 to 11 shift with the same unhurried precision she used to run board. He carried a faded blue backpack that looked like it had seen better decades, and he walked with a slight limp that favored his right leg. These were details she had no reason to know and no use for, yet they had accumulated in her mind like unwanted data. And now it was 3 o'clock on a Friday, and instead of preparing for her 4 o'clock strategy session, Victoria was standing at her window watching Marcus Webb walk across the parking lot. He wasn't heading toward the building. He was heading away from it, toward the bus stop at the far edge of the property. This was wrong. She knew his schedule now, had memorized it without meaning to. He worked Fridays. He always worked Fridays. He was the one constant in the building's evening cleaning rotation. Victoria felt a strange flutter in her chest, something between curiosity and concern. It was absurd. The man's attendance record was none of her business. If he was calling in sick or taking personal time, that was between him and his supervisor. She should return to her desk, review the quarterly projections, prepare her talking points for the strategy session. That's what a rational person. That's what the woman who had clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated industry. Instead, she found herself grabbing her car keys. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like a descent into temporary insanity. What was she doing? Following her janitor? The absurdity of it made her hands shake slightly as she slid behind the wheel of her sleek black Mercedes. Through the windshield, she could see Marcus at the bus stop, checking his phone with the careful attention of someone for whom data plans were a luxury to be rationed. The Friday afternoon traffic crawled past him, a river of people eager to start their weekends. When the bus arrived, Victoria started her engine. She told herself she would just see where he went, satisfy this strange curiosity, and then return to work. It would take 15 minutes, maybe 20. She could still make the strategy session. This wasn't completely irrational. As CEO, she should know her employees, should understand the lives of the people who kept her building running. This was research. This was due diligence. The bus pulled away from the curb and Victoria followed at a careful distance. The route took them away from the gleaming downtown corridor where Sterling Tech resided and into neighborhoods that grew progressively less polished. The modern glass towers gave way to older brick buildings, then to residential streets lined with modest houses and small apartment complexes. She'd lived in this city for 15 years and had never driven through these streets. Her world was a carefully curated loop between her penthouse downtown, her office, and the handful of upscale restaurants where she conducted business dinners. The bus made frequent stops, passengers boarding and departing in the Friday afternoon rhythm. Victoria stayed 3 cars back, feeling increasingly foolish. What did she expect to find? What did she think she would discover that would justify this bizarre breach of professional boundaries? Marcus was just a janitor going about his life. Whatever that life was, it had nothing to do with her. After 20 minutes, the bus turned onto a street called Maple Grove Drive. The houses here were small and worn, their paint peeling, their yards overgrown. Many had bars on the windows. Victoria's Mercedes felt obscenely out of place, like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong decade. She saw heads turn as she passed, neighborhood residents marking the presence of an expensive vehicle. Her hands tightened on the steering. The bus stopped at the corner of Maple Grove and 14th Street. Through the grimy bus windows, Victoria saw Marcus stand and make his way toward the exit. She pulled over 2 houses down, partially hidden behind a rusted pickup truck, and watched as he descended the bus steps. His limp was more pronounced now, as though the day had already taken its toll. He adjusted his backpack on his shoulders and began walking down Maple Grove with purposeful strides. Victoria waited until he was half a block ahead before she started following on foot. She'd left her car running, a risk in this neighborhood, but something told her this wouldn't take long. She was going to see where he lived, satisfy her inexplicable need to understand this small piece of his existence, and then return to her rational life. Already, she was composing the story she would tell herself later. How this had been a momentary lapse in judgment brought on by stress or fatigue or too much coffee. Marcus turned into the driveway of a small house painted a faded yellow. The mailbox listed to one side and the front steps had been repaired with mismatched boards. But the tiny yard was neat. The grass recently cut, and someone had planted bright red geraniums in pots on either side of the door. It was a house that was loved, despite its poverty, maintained with whatever resources were available. Victoria expected him to go inside. Instead, he walked around to the side of the house where a separate entrance led to what was clearly a basement apartment. He took out his keys, but before he could unlock the door, it flew open. A small figure launched itself at him, wrapping thin arms around his waist. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. It was a girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with wild curly hair pulled back in a ponytail and a gap-toothed smile that could have lit up the whole street. She was wearing faded jeans and a t-shirt that was 2 sizes too big, probably a hand-me-down, and her feet were bare despite the cool October air. Marcus caught the girl and lifted her up, spinning her around despite his obvious exhaustion and the pain that flashed across his face from the movement. The girl threw her head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unself-conscious joy that carried across the small yard. Victoria found herself pressing closer to the corner of the neighboring house, hidden behind an overgrown hedge, watching this scene like a spy. She should leave. She should absolutely leave right now. This was beyond inappropriate. This was a violation of privacy that could cost her everything if anyone found out. CEOs didn't follow their employees home. CEOs didn't lurk in hedges watching private family moments. But Victoria couldn't move. She was transfixed by the tenderness in Marcus's Webb's face as he set the girl down and knelt in front of her, ignoring the pain it clearly caused his bad leg. He was saying something Victoria couldn't hear, and the girl was nodding enthusiastically, her hands moving in animated gestures as she talked. There was such easy love between them, such uncomplicated connection that Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. When had someone last looked at her like that? When had someone's whole face lit up just because she'd walked through a door? Her own daughter, Sophia, was 12 years old and currently at an elite boarding school in Connecticut. They spoke twice a week on scheduled video calls that felt more like status reports than conversations. Her ex-husband, Richard, had remarried 2 years ago and had just welcomed a son, a replacement family, to erase the one they'd failed to build together. Victoria's parents were dead, casualties of a car accident when she was in college. She had colleagues, business associates, a personal trainer, a hairstylist, and a therapist she saw monthly to manage her stress levels. But she had no one who would throw open a door and launch themselves at her with pure joy. Marcus stood up, taking the girl's hand, and together they walked into the basement apartment. The door closed behind them, and Victoria was left standing in a stranger's yard, staring at a closed door, feeling more alone than she had in years. The autumn sun was slanting low now, casting long shadows across Maple Grove Drive. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of the neighborhood, children playing, someone's television too loud, a dog barking. Life, ordinary and real, happening all around her. Victoria walked back to her car in a daze. She slid behind the wheel and sat there, her hands resting on the leather steering wheel, staring at nothing. She'd followed her janitor home and discovered he had a daughter who loved him. That was it. That was the great revelation. It should have felt anticlimactic, silly even. Instead, it felt like a wound had been opened, exposing something raw and aching that she'd spent years carefully burying under ambition and achievement. She'd missed Sophia's 10th birthday because of a merger negotiation in Tokyo. She'd missed the school play where her daughter had the lead role because of an emergency board meeting. She'd missed so many moments, convinced that her success was building a better future for them both, never stopping to ask if her daughter wanted a better future or just wanted her mother. Victoria pulled out her phone and looked at her calendar. The 4 o'clock strategy session had had started 10 minutes ago. Her assistant had called twice. There were 14 unread emails flagged as urgent, but she couldn't make herself care. She couldn't make herself put the car in drive and return to that glass tower and that immaculate office and that carefully constructed life, because she'd seen something today that had shattered the comfortable lie she'd been telling herself. She'd seen a man with nothing, a man who mopped floors and rode the bus and lived in a basement apartment, who had everything she'd lost. He had connection. He had love. He had someone who needed him not for what he could provide or accomplish, but simply because he was who he was. The tears came without warning. Victoria sat in her car for 20 minutes, crying in a way she hadn't allowed herself to cry since the divorce. Not the elegant, controlled tears she'd shed in her therapist's office, but ugly, gasping sobs that left her makeup ruined and her throat raw. She cried for Sophia, growing up in a dorm room 3 states away. She cried for the marriage she'd sacrificed on the altar of her ambition. She cried for the woman she'd been at 25, bright-eyed and full of dreams that included both corner offices and family dinners. Most of all, she cried because she'd just spent her Friday afternoon following a janitor home like some kind of stalker, and she didn't even understand why. When the tears finally subsided, Victoria looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her mascara had run in dark streaks down her cheeks. Her carefully styled hair had come loose from its clip. She looked like a woman having a breakdown, which she supposed was accurate. She grabbed tissues from the console and tried to repair the damage, but it was hopeless. She looked wrecked and there was no hiding it. Her phone buzzed again. Her assistant Jennifer with the 5th call in 30 minutes. Victoria stared at the screen, watching it ring, unable to make herself answer. What would she say? Sorry, Jennifer, I was busy having an existential crisis in a stranger's neighborhood because I followed our janitor home. Please reschedule the strategy session and tell the board I've lost my mind. The phone went to voicemail. A moment later, a text arrived. Victoria, everyone is very concerned. Please let me know you're okay. The board is asking questions. Single quotes the board. Of course they were. Sterling Tech's board of directors had been looking for an excuse to question her leadership for months. They'd installed her as CEO 3 years ago as a progressive gesture, thrilled to put a young woman's face on their annual report, but they'd never quite trusted her. Every decision was scrutinized, every stumble magnified. They were waiting for her to fail so they could replace her with someone safer, someone who looked like them. And here she was, missing critical meetings to have a meltdown in her Mercedes. She was gift-wrapping them their excuse. Victoria took a shaky breath and forced herself to think clearly. She couldn't go back to the office looking like this. She couldn't face the board's questions or Jennifer's worried eyes. She needed to go home, pull herself together, and figure out what was happening to her. This wasn't like her. Victoria Chun didn't break down. She didn't follow impulses. She didn't cry in cars in bad neighborhoods. Something was very wrong. She started the engine and began the drive back to her penthouse, but her mind kept returning to that moment when the little girl had thrown open the door. The pure joy on that child's face. The way Marcus had knelt down despite his pain just to be at her eye level. The casual intimacy of love that required no performance, no achievement, no justification. It simply existed, uncomplicated and real. Sophia used to look at her like that. When her daughter was small, maybe 4 or 5, she would wait by the door every evening for Victoria to come home from work. The moment the key turned in the lock, Sophia would come running, her little arms outstretched, yelling "Mommy," like it was the best word in the world. Tori would scoop her up and breathe in the scent of her baby shampoo and feel, for just that moment, that everything she was working for made sense. When had that stopped? Victoria couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It had been gradual, a slow erosion. The evenings came later. The business trips grew longer. Sophia stopped waiting by the door and started doing her homework with the nanny instead. By the time Victoria got home, her daughter would already be in bed, or if she was still awake, she'd give her mother a dutiful kiss on the cheek that felt more like obligation than joy. And Victoria had told herself it was fine, it was normal, it was the price of success. Children grew up. They became independent. This was healthy. But was it? Or had Victoria just broken something precious and irreplaceable, too focused on quarterly earnings to notice until it was too late? Her phone rang again. This time it was Richard, her ex-husband. That was unusual. They rarely spoke directly anymore, communicating mostly through lawyers about custody arrangements and trust fund details. Victoria almost didn't answer, but something made her press the button. "Richard, Victoria, what's going on?" His voice carried that particular mix of condescension and concern that had characterized the last 5 years of their marriage. "Jennifer called me. She's worried about you. She said you disappeared in the middle of a board meeting." "I didn't disappear. I had something to take care of. On a Friday afternoon during a strategy session?" He paused, and she could hear the baby crying in the background. His new life, the one he'd built with a woman 10 years younger who didn't work 70-hour weeks. "Victoria, you need to be careful. You know, the board is looking for reasons to question your stability." "My stability is fine, is it? Because this doesn't sound fine. This sounds like you're spiraling." Victoria felt a hot spike of anger cut through her emotional exhaustion. "I'm not spiraling. I just needed some air. Some air." He didn't bother to hide his skepticism. "Look, I know you've been under a lot of pressure. Maybe you should take some time off. See your therapist more often. The board would understand that as weakness. Then maybe you need to ask yourself if this is all worth it. His voice softened, taking on the patronizing tone he used when he thought he was being wise. Proven yourself, Victoria. You've broken the glass ceiling. You've made your point, but at what cost? Sophia barely knows you anymore. When I dropped her off at school last month, she asked if you were going to visit for Thanksgiving or if you'd be too busy again. The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria's hands tightened on the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you spent more than 2 days with your daughter? I provide for her. She goes to the best school in the country. She has every opportunity. She has everything except her mother. The baby's crying grew louder and Richard sighed. I have to go. Just think about what I said. Maybe it's time to reassess your priorities before you lose everything that matters. He hung up before she could respond. Victoria stared at the phone, her vision blurring with fresh tears. She hated him. She hated his righteous judgment, his comfortable remarriage, his perfect little replacement family. But most of all, she hated that he might be right. By the time she reached her building, the sun had set completely. The doorman greeted her with his usual professional courtesy, but she saw his eyes widen slightly at her appearance. She must look even worse than she thought. She made her way to the elevator, grateful that the lobby was empty, and rode up to the 45th floor in silence. Her penthouse was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Immaculate, expensive, hollow. The living room could have been featured in an architecture magazine. All clean lines and carefully curated art. Nothing was out of place. Nothing suggested that anyone actually lived here. It was a showroom, not a home. Victoria dropped her purse on the marble counter and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Somewhere down there in one of those anonymous buildings, Marcus Webb was probably having dinner with his daughter. They were probably sitting at a small table in that basement apartment, eating something simple, talking about their day. The girl was probably telling him about school or friends or some small triumph that mattered only to her, and Marcus was probably listening like it was the most important conversation in the world. When was the last time Victoria had sat down for a meal with Sophia? Really sat down without checking her phone or thinking about work? She couldn't remember. Even on the rare weekends they spent together, Victoria was always half present, her mind churning through problems and strategies. She'd convinced herself that this was necessary, that her daughter understood the importance of her work. But what if Sophia didn't understand? What if she just felt abandoned? Victoria's phone buzzed with another text. Jennifer again, more urgent this time. The board wants a meeting first thing Monday morning. They're saying they need to discuss your commitment to the company. Please call me. Her commitment to the company. That was rich. Victoria had given Sterling Tech everything. She'd sacrificed her marriage, her relationship with her daughter, her health, her happiness. She'd poured every ounce of herself into making that company profitable and powerful. And now they were questioning her commitment because she'd missed one meeting? Or maybe they were right to question it. Because sitting here in her empty penthouse, looking out at a city full of strangers, Victoria was starting to question it herself. She'd climbed the ladder everyone told her to climb, broken the barriers everyone told her to break, achieved the success everyone told her to want. For what? To sit alone in a glass tower while her daughter grew up without her? To spend her Friday evenings crying in cars because she'd glimpsed the life she'd traded away? Victoria walked to her desk and pulled out a framed photograph she kept in the bottom drawer, hidden away where she wouldn't have to look at it every day. It was from Sophia's 5th birthday party, the last one they'd celebrated before the divorce. In the photo, Sophia was sitting on Victoria's lap, both of them laughing at something Richard had said while taking the picture. Sophia's hair was in pigtails tied with pink ribbons, and she was holding a piece of birthday cake in her chubby hands. Victoria's arms were wrapped around her daughter, and her face was radiant with an uncomplicated happiness she barely recognized anymore. That woman in the photo seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime, someone who still believed she could have everything. When had Victoria stopped being her? When had she become this hollow, driven thing who measured her worth in stock prices and board approvals? The weekend passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Victoria tried to work, opening her laptop Saturday morning with every intention of preparing for the board meeting, but the words on the screen swam before her eyes, meaningless collections of data that used to make perfect sense. She found herself staring out the window instead, thinking about basement apartments and little girls with gap-toothed smiles. By Sunday afternoon, she'd accomplished nothing except confirming what she'd already suspected. Something fundamental had broken inside her on that Friday, and she had no idea how to fix it. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a cold rain that matched her mood perfectly. Victoria dressed with extra care, armor for the battle ahead, a charcoal suit that screamed authority, her hair pulled back severely, makeup applied with precision to hide the shadows under her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw exactly what she'd intended, a woman in complete control. The image was perfect. It was also a complete lie. The board meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Victoria arrived at 7:30, determined to appear calm and prepared despite having prepared nothing. Jennifer met her at the elevator with an expression that managed to convey both relief and terror. "Thank God you're here," Jennifer said, falling into step beside her. "They've been calling me all weekend." "Victoria, what happened on Friday? Where did you go? I had a personal emergency. What kind of emergency? Are you okay? Is Sophia okay? Victoria felt a flash of irritation. Jennifer had been her assistant for 5 years, efficient and loyal, but sometimes her concern felt more like surveillance. Everything is fine. I just needed to take care of something. It won't happen again. The board doesn't think it's fine. Wallace Chun has been making calls. Jennifer lowered her voice even though they were alone in the hallway. He's gathering support for a vote of no confidence. Wallace Chun, despite the shared surname, was the oldest board member and the most traditional. He'd opposed Victoria's appointment from the beginning, convinced that a woman, especially a young woman, couldn't handle the pressure of running a company like Sterling Tech. Every stumble she'd made in 3 years had been documented, analyzed, and weaponized. And now, she'd handed him exactly what he needed. Let me guess, Victoria said, her voice flat. He's concerned about my stability, my commitment, my judgment, all of the above. Jennifer handed her a folder. I pulled the numbers from Friday's meeting. Your presentation was perfect, by the way. The board approved the expansion into Southeast Asia markets before you left. This isn't about business performance. It never is. Victoria took the folder but didn't open it. She knew what this was really about. Wallace and the others like him wanted someone who would smile and nod and make the company look progressive while still letting them pull the strings. Victoria had never been that person. She'd fought for every decision, challenged every assumption, refused to be the decorative female CEO they'd imagined, and they'd been looking for an excuse to remove her ever since. The boardroom was on the 43rd floor, a cathedral of corporate power with a massive table and leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. When Victoria entered, 8 of the 12 board members were already seated. Wallace sat at the far end, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression radiating patrician disapproval. The others looked uncomfortable, avoiding her eyes. Victoria, Wallace said, his tone making her title sound like an insult. Thank you for joining us. Please, sit down. She took her seat at the head of the table, the CEO's chair, and met his gaze without flinching. Wallace, gentlemen, lady, I understand there are concerns about Friday's absence. Concerns is putting it mildly. Wallace leaned forward, his fingers steepled in front of him. You disappeared in the middle of a critical strategy meeting. You ignored calls from your assistant and from other board members. You provided no explanation for your whereabouts. This is not the behavior we expect from someone in your position. I apologize for any inconvenience. I had an urgent personal matter that required immediate attention. What matter? The question came from Margaret Wong, the only other woman on the board. Her tone was gentler than Wallace's, but no less demanding. Victoria felt the trap closing. If she told them the truth, they'd think she was insane. If she lied, they'd smell it. If she refused to answer, they'd assume the worst. There was no good option here. My daughter's school contacted me about a situation that needed to be addressed immediately, she said, the lie forming itself as she spoke. It wasn't even a convincing lie. Sophia's school would never call her first. They'd call Richard, but it was better than the truth. I see. Wallace's tone made it clear he didn't believe her. And this situation was so urgent that you couldn't take 30 seconds to inform your assistant? So critical that you couldn't return phone calls for the entire weekend. I used my judgment in the moment. Perhaps I made the wrong call. I apologize. Your judgment. Wallace picked up a piece of paper from the file in front of him. Let's talk about judgment, shall we? In the past 6 months, you've made several decisions that have concerned this board. The Henderson acquisition that lost us $20 million. The product launch that was delayed by 3 months. The lawsuit from that former VP of marketing who claims you created a hostile work environment. All of which were external factors or baseless accusations that have been addressed, Victoria said, her voice leveled despite the anger building in her chest. The Henderson acquisition was a calculated risk that didn't pan out. The product delay was due to supply chain issues that affected the entire industry. And the lawsuit was dismissed because it had no merit whatsoever. Nevertheless, the pattern suggests a CEO who is distracted, who is not fully committed to her responsibility. Wallace looked around the table, gathering support from the others. We need leadership that is present, Victoria. Leadership that puts this company first. Always. Can you honestly tell us that you are that person? The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment where she was supposed to reassure them, to promise renewed focus and dedication, to smooth over their concerns with confident corporate speak. 6 months ago, she would have done exactly that without hesitation. But sitting in that leather chair, looking at Wallace's Chun's smug face, Victoria found she couldn't say the words, because the honest answer was no. She couldn't promise to put the company first, always. Not anymore. Not when putting the company first had cost her everything that mattered. I can tell you, she said slowly, choosing each word with care, that I have given Sterling Tech everything I have for 3 years. I've increased our market share by 35%. I've streamlined operations and cut unnecessary costs while increasing employee satisfaction. I've made this company more profitable and more respected than it's ever been. And yes, on Friday, I made a decision to prioritize something personal over a single meeting. If that makes me unfit for this position, then perhaps we need to discuss what kind of CEO you really want. The silence that followed was deafening. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Margaret Wong looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Wallace's face had gone red with barely contained rage. What we want, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, is a CEO who understands that this company is bigger than any individual. We want someone who won't disappear without explanation. We want someone we can trust. And I want, Victoria heard herself saying, the words coming from some deep, reckless place she didn't know she possessed. To know that I'm working with people who value me as a human being, not just as a profit-generating machine. I want to know that one personal emergency won't be used as ammunition to destroy me. I want to work in an environment where the fact that I'm a woman isn't being held against me at every turn. Wallace stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. That is absolutely uncalled for. This has nothing to do with gender, doesn't it? Victoria stood as well, meeting him across the table. Tell me, Wallace, when James Morrison was CEO and he missed 3 board meetings in a row because of his golf tournament in Scotland, did anyone question his commitment? When Robert Chun, your cousin, showed up drunk to a shareholder presentation, did anyone talk about his stability? That was different. How? How was it different except that they were men and I'm not? The room erupted in overlapping voices, some supporting Wallace, others trying to calm the situation, Margaret Wong attempting to call for order. Victoria stood at the head of the table, her heart pounding, watching her career implode in real time. She should stop. She should apologize and sit down and save whatever could be saved, but she found she didn't want to. For 3 years, she'd swallowed her anger and played their game and smiled through their condescension. For what? For this moment, where they were going to destroy her anyway? The chaos in the boardroom continued for another 30 seconds before Margaret Wong's voice cut through the noise. Everyone, please. This is getting us nowhere. She turned to Victoria, her expression somewhere between sympathy and exasperation. Victoria, I think you should take the rest of the day to cool down. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning to discuss this situation more calmly. It was a lifeline, and they both knew it. A chance for Victoria to retreat, apologize, and salvage what remained of her position. But Victoria was done accepting lifelines that came with strings attached. I don't need to cool down, Margaret. I need this board to acknowledge that I've been treated differently from every male CEO this company's ever had. I need someone to admit that the standards I'm held to are impossible because they're designed to make me fail. Victoria, please. Margaret's tone had shifted from sympathetic to urgent. You're making this worse. How could it possibly be worse? Wallace called this meeting to question my fitness for this position. So let's be honest about what's really happening here. You want me gone. You've always wanted me gone. Friday just gave you the excuse you needed. Wallace had regained his composure, his face settling into an expression of cold disdain. If you want to frame this as some kind of persecution, that's your choice. But the fact remains that you abandoned your responsibilities without explanation. That's not about gender. That's about professionalism. I had a personal emergency, which you still haven't adequately explained. He sat back down, confident now, sensing victory. So let's hear it, Victoria. What was so important that it justified disappearing in the middle of a workday? What emergency was worth risking your career over? Every eye in the room fixed on her, waiting. Victoria felt the trap snap shut completely. She couldn't tell them she'd followed the janitor home. She couldn't tell them she'd spent Friday afternoon having an existential crisis in a stranger's neighborhood. She couldn't tell them the truth without confirming every doubt they had about her stability. But she also couldn't lie convincingly. They'd check. They'd call Sophia's school, talk to Richard, investigate every detail of her story. And when they discovered she'd lied, it would be the final nail in the coffin. I needed some space, she said finally, her voice quiet, to think, to evaluate my priorities. And I realized that I'd been sacrificing everything that matters for a company that doesn't value me. So perhaps you're right, Wallace. Perhaps this isn't working anymore. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Several board members exchanged glances. Margaret's eyes went wide. Wallace leaned forward, smelling blood. Are you resigning? He asked, unable to keep the triumph out of his voice. Was she? Victoria hadn't meant to resign. The words had just come out, bypassing her rational mind entirely. But now that they were spoken, she found she didn't want to take them back. The thought of continuing this fight, of spending the next weeks or months being scrutinized and undermined, filled her with exhaustion so profound it felt like drowning. I'm saying that I need to think about whether this is the right place for me anymore. Then think quickly, Wallace said, because this board cannot function with a CEO who is ambivalent about her position. We need decisive leadership, not someone who is questioning their priorities. He glanced at his watch, a calculated gesture. I suggest we give you until Wednesday. That's 2 days to decide whether you want to remain as CEO or step down voluntarily. If you choose to stay, you'll need to provide this board with assurances that Friday's behavior will not be repeated. If you choose to leave, we'll negotiate an exit package that's fair to both parties. That's very generous of you, Wallace, Victoria said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. It's more generous than you deserve. He began gathering his papers. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock sharp. Please don't be late. Victoria walked out of the boardroom with her head high, but her legs felt unsteady. Jennifer was waiting in the hallway, her face pale with worry. Victoria, what happened in there? People are saying you threatened to quit. I didn't threaten anything. I just told them the truth, which is what, exactly? Jennifer fell into step beside her as they walked toward Victoria's office. Because the truth right now looks like career suicide. Maybe that's what it is. Victoria pushed open her office door and walked to the windows, staring out at the city below. Maybe I've been killing myself by inches for years, and Friday was just the day I finally noticed. Jennifer closed the door behind them, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Okay, I get that you're going through something. I can see that. But Victoria, you can't just throw away everything you've built. Do you know how many women are waiting for you to fail? How many men are going to use this as proof that women can't handle executive pressure? That's not my responsibility. Maybe not, but it's the reality. You're not just a CEO, Victoria. Whether you like it or not, you're a symbol. And if you quit now, It's gonna make it harder for every woman who comes after you. The words hit Victoria like a slap. She turned away from the window to face her assistant. So I'm supposed to sacrifice my mental health and my relationship with my daughter because I'm a symbol? I'm supposed to keep working for people who hate me because other women need me to prove something? I'm saying that maybe you shouldn't make any major decisions right now when you're clearly not thinking straight. Jennifer's expression softened. Look, I don't know what happened to you on Friday. I don't know what you're dealing with, but I do know that you're the best CEO this company's ever had. And walking away now would be a mistake you'd regret for the rest of your life, would she? Victoria genuinely didn't know. A week ago, the answer would have been obvious. Of course she'd regret it. This job was everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed for. But after seeing Marcus Webb kneel down to talk to his daughter, after feeling the emptiness of her own penthouse, after realizing that Sophia barely knew her anymore, Victoria wasn't sure what she'd regret more, leaving or staying. I need to be alone, she said to Jennifer. Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day. All of them? All of them. Tell people I'm working on my presentation for Wednesday. Tell them whatever you want. Just give me some space. Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Victoria's expression stopped her. She nodded and left quietly, closing the door behind her. Victoria sank into her chair and stared at her computer screen. Her inbox showed 247 unread emails. Her calendar was packed solid for the next 3 months. Somewhere in her desk drawer was a list of goals she'd made at the beginning of the year. Increase market share by 20%, launch 3 new product lines, expand into 5 new international markets. She'd achieved most of them already. By any objective measure, she was succeeding. So why did it feel like she was failing at everything that mattered? Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Heard about the board meeting. Are you okay? News traveled fast. Someone in that room must have called him immediately, probably Margaret, who had always liked Richard. Victoria typed out a response, then deleted it. What was she supposed to say? No, I'm not okay. I'm having some kind of breakdown and I don't know how to stop it. She put the phone face down on her desk and ignored it. The afternoon dragged by in a haze. Victoria tried to focus on the presentation she would need to give on Wednesday. But her mind kept drifting to that yellow house on Maple Grove Drive. She wondered what Marcus and his daughter were doing right now. Probably something mundane, homework maybe, or watching television, or just talking about their day. Simple things that she'd once taken for granted and now couldn't remember how to do. At 3 o'clock, she heard the familiar squeak of a cleaning cart in the hallway outside her office. Marcus always started his rounds on this floor at 3. She'd learned his schedule without meaning to, had memorized the rhythm of his movements through the building. She stood up and walked to her door, opening it just as he was passing by. He looked up, startled, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Victoria saw recognition in his face, but also confusion. Why was the CEO standing in her doorway staring at him? She realized she had no explanation. No excuse for this behavior. She was just drawn to him in a way she couldn't name. This man who represented everything she'd lost. Mr. Webb, she said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. Miss Chun. He stood awkwardly, one hand on his cart, clearly uncertain whether he should keep moving or wait for whatever she wanted. Your daughter, Victoria heard herself say. The little girl I saw on Friday. How old is she? His expression shifted from confusion to something like alarm. You saw Lily? I was in the neighborhood. I saw her greet you when you came home. The lie felt thin, transparent. She seemed very happy. Marcus's hand tightened on the cart. With respect, Ms. Chun, I don't think my personal life is really your concern. No, of course not. I didn't mean to pry. Victoria felt her face flush with embarrassment. What was she doing? Why was she standing here asking her janitor about his daughter? I apologize. That was inappropriate. Is there something else I can help you with? His tone was polite but guarded, the voice of someone who has learned to be careful around people with power. No, I just wanted to say that she seems like a wonderful child. You're very lucky. Something in Marcus's expression softened slightly. I am. Luckiest man alive. He paused, then added, Is everything all right, Miss Chun? You seem like you're having a rough day. The simple kindness of the question nearly undid her. When was the last time someone had asked if she was all right and actually seemed to care about the answer? Not Jennifer with her professional concern, not Richard with his judgment, not the board with their scrutiny, just a genuine question from another human being. I'm fine, she said automatically. Then, more honestly, actually, no, I'm not fine at all. But thank you for asking. Single quotes. Marcus Webb stood in the hallway with his cleaning cart, looking at the CEO of Sterling Tech with an expression that held no judgment, only a quiet understanding. It was that lack of judgment that made Victoria's carefully constructed walls crumble a little more. Would you like to talk about it? He asked, his voice gentle. I'm just the janitor, so you don't have to worry about me gossiping in the break room. Victoria let out a short, bitter laugh. Just the janitor. Is that how you see yourself? It's what I am. Is it? She studied his face, seeing things she hadn't noticed before, the intelligence in his eyes, the way he carried himself with a quiet dignity that had nothing to do with his uniform or his job title. I don't think so. I think you're someone who ended up here for reasons that have nothing to do with what you're capable. Marcus's expression became guarded again. You don't know anything about me, Miss Chun. You're right. I don't, but I'd like to. The words came out before she could stop them, and Victoria felt a rush of embarrassment. She was the CEO, standing in the hallway asking her janitor to be her confidant. If anyone saw this, it would be fuel for Wallace's fire. She found she didn't care. I saw something on Friday that I can't stop help thinking about. What did you see? The way your daughter looked at you when you came home, the way she ran to you, joy in her face. Victoria's voice caught slightly. My daughter used to look at me like that. She doesn't anymore, and I don't know how to get it back. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands still resting on the cart. How old is your daughter? 12. She's at boarding school in Connecticut. We video chat twice a week. That must be hard, being apart. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving her the best education, the best opportunities. But my ex-husband told me she asked if I'd be too busy to visit for Thanksgiving. Victoria looked down at her hands. I don't even remember when I became the parent who's too busy. It happens gradually, Marcus said softly. You make one choice, then another, then another. Each one seems reasonable at the time. And then you wake up one day and realize you've built a life you don't recognize. Is that what happened to you? He hesitated, then nodded. In a way. I used to be a teacher. High school English. I loved it. Had this crazy idea that I could change kids' lives through literature. He smiled sadly. Then my wife got sick. Cancer. The medical bills were crushing and the school insurance wasn't enough. I took a second job, then a third. I was never home. And when I was home, I was too exhausted to be present. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once she got better, everything would go back to normal. But she didn't get better. No, she died 3 years ago. And I was left with a mountain of debt and a daughter who barely knew me anymore. I'd been so busy trying to save my wife that I forgot to be a father. His voice was steady, but Victoria could hear the grief beneath it. So I sold the house, sold everything we owned, and moved to the city where I could make enough to pay off the debt and start over. Custodial work pays better than teaching, ironically enough, and it has one major advantage. When my shift ends at 11, I'm done. No papers to grade, no lesson plans to write. I can go home and focus entirely on Lily. That's her name? Lily? Lily Webb? She's 9 years old, and she's the only thing I got right in my entire life. He met Victoria's eyes, and she saw the fierce love there. I failed my wife. I failed my students. I failed myself, but I'm not going to fail my daughter. Not again. Victoria felt tears threatening and blinked them back. How did you do it? How did you rebuild that connection with her? I showed up, Marcus said simply. Every single day I showed up. At first she didn't trust it. She was angry with me for all the times I hadn't been there, but I kept showing up anyway. I made breakfast every morning before school. I helped with homework every night. I listened when she talked about her day. Really listened, even when I was tired. It took months, but slowly she started to believe that I wasn't going to, that she could count on me. I don't have months. I have 2 days to decide whether to keep this job or resign, and I don't know what the right answer is anymore. What does your daughter want? The question was so simple, so obvious that it hit Victoria like a revelation. What did Sophia want? Victoria had never asked. She'd made all her decisions based on what she thought was best, what would give Sophia the most advantages, what would secure her future. But she'd never simply asked her daughter what she wanted. I don't know, Victoria admitted. I assumed she wanted me to be successful, to be a role model, to show her that women can do anything. Maybe she just wants her mom. The words settled into Victoria's chest like stones. She thought about all the times she'd chosen work over Sophia. The birthdays missed, the school plays skipped, the phone calls cut short because a meeting was starting. She'd told herself each time that Sophia would understand when she was older, that she'd appreciate the sacrifices Victoria had made. But what if she didn't? What if all Sophia would remember was a mother who was never there? I followed you home on Friday, Victoria said suddenly, needing to confess. I saw you leave work early and I followed you. I watched you with your daughter. I sat in my car and cried because you have something I've lost, and I don't know how to get it back. Marcus's eyebrows rose, and for a moment Victoria thought he might be angry. Instead, he just looked sad. That must have been a hard thing to realize. It was. It is. Victoria wiped at her eyes, not caring anymore if her makeup smeared. I've spent 15 years climbing this ladder, breaking these barriers, proving I could do what everyone said women couldn't do, and I succeeded. I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I'm on the cover of Business Magazine. I'm a success story, but my daughter doesn't know me. My marriage fell apart, and I don't have a single person in my life who would run to the door to greet me the way your daughter greets you. Success isn't worth much if you're alone at the top, Marcus said quietly. No, it's not. Victoria took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be unloading all of this on you. You're here to do your job, not to be my therapist. I don't mind. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who's outside your world, someone who doesn't have an agenda. Don't you, though? I'm the CEO. I could fire you with a phone call. Doesn't that make you careful about what you say to me? Marcus smiled slightly. Miss Chun, I've been fired from better jobs than this one. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not just to keep cleaning your floors. If you want honesty, I'll give it to you. If you want me to leave you alone, I'll do that too. But I won't play games. His directness was refreshing after a morning of board politics and corporate doublespeak. What would you do if you were me? I can't answer that. I don't know your life, your responsibilities, but I can tell you what I learned the hard way. He leaned slightly against his cart, his expression thoughtful. No one on their deathbed wishes they'd spent more time at the office. My wife's last coherent words to me were about Lily. She made me promise I'd be there for her. Really be there, not just physically present, but emotionally available. I broke a lot of promises to my wife, but I'm keeping that one. I'm not dying. No, but you're not really living either, are you? The question wasn't cruel, just honest. You said yourself you don't know your daughter anymore. You're working for people who don't respect you. You're succeeding at something that's making you miserable. What's the point? The point is that I worked too hard to get here to just give up. Women like me don't get second chances. If I walk away from this, I'll be proving everyone right who said I couldn't, or you'll be proving that you're smart enough to know when something isn't worth the cost. Marcus straightened up, preparing to continue his rounds. But that's just the opinion of a janitor. What do I know? More than you think. Victoria stepped back into her office doorway. Thank you, Mr. Webb, for listening, for being honest. Anytime, Miss Chun. He started pushing his cart down the hall, then paused and looked back. For what it's worth, I think your daughter would rather have a happy mother who's present than a miserable mother who's successful. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They know what matters. He disappeared around the corner, leaving Victoria standing in the doorway, his words echoing in her mind. She went back into her office and closed the door, then did something she hadn't done in months. She pulled up Sophia's school portal on her computer and looked at her daughter's schedule. Tuesday afternoon, Sophia had free time from 3 to 5, 2 hours when she wasn't in class or at activities. Victoria looked at her own calendar. Tomorrow afternoon at 3, she had a meeting with the marketing department about Q4 campaigns. It wasn't critical. Jennifer could handle. She could be on a plane to Connecticut by 1 o'clock and at Sophia's school by 4. The thought terrified her. What would she say? How would Sophia react? They'd planned a Thanksgiving visit, carefully scheduled and organized. Just showing up unannounced would disrupt everything. Sophia might not even want to see her. But maybe, Victoria thought, that was exactly the point. Maybe she needed to disrupt everything. Maybe she needed to stop scheduling her relationship with her daughter like it was just another business meet. Maybe she needed to show up the way Marcus showed up for Lily every single day. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She lay in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible scenario in her mind. Sophia would be thrilled. Sophia would be angry. Sophia would be indifferent. Each possibility felt equally plausible and equally terrifying. By the time dawn broke over the city, Victoria had convinced herself a dozen times not to go and a dozen times that she had to. At 6 in the morning, she made her decision. She called the airline and booked a seat on the 9 o'clock flight to Hartford. Then she texted Jennifer, "Cancel all my meetings today. Personal emergency. I'll be back tomorrow." She didn't wait for a response. She showered, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual armor of expensive suits, and called for a car to take her to the airport. The driver tried to make small talk, but Victoria couldn't focus on the conversation. Her mind was racing with everything she wanted to say to Sophia and everything she was afraid to hear in return. She'd spent so many hours preparing for board meetings and investor calls, rehearsing every word, anticipating every question, but she had no script for this. She was just a mother going to see her daughter, and she had no idea what that even meant anymore. The flight was mercifully short, less than an hour in the air. Victoria spent the entire time staring out the window at the clouds below, her hands gripping the armrests. The woman in the seat next to her asked if she was afraid of flying. Victoria almost laughed. She wasn't afraid of flying. She was afraid of landing, of facing the consequences of years of absence, of discovering that she'd waited too long to fix what she'd broken. She rented a car at the airport and drove through the autumn landscape of Connecticut, past forests blazing with red and gold leaves, past quaint towns with white churches and general stores. Sophia's school, Riverview Academy, was an hour from the airport, nestled in the rolling hills. It was one of the most prestigious preparatory schools in the country, a place where senators and CEOs sent their children to ensure their futures. Victoria had been so proud when Sophia was accepted. She'd seen it as proof that she was giving her daughter every advantage, every opportunity. Now pulling through the massive iron gates with the school crest emblazoned on them, she just saw distant, miles and miles of distance between her and her child. The main office was in a brick building that looked like it had been transplanted from Oxford. A young woman at the reception desk looked up as Victoria entered, her professional smile in place. "Good morning. How can I help you? I'm here to see my daughter, Sophia Chun. I'm her mother, Victoria Chun." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly as she checked her computer. "I don't see you on our approved visitor list for today. Do you have an appointment?" "No, I don't, but I'm her mother." "Surely I don't need an appointment to see my own daughter. School policy requires 24 hours notice for family visits during the academic week unless it's an emergency." The receptionist's tone was apologetic but firm. "It helps us maintain the students' schedules and academic focus. It is an emergency." Victoria heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. "Please. I need to see her. Just for a few minutes." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up her phone. "Let me call the headmaster's office." She spoke quietly into the receiver, glancing at Victoria several times, then hung up. "Doctor Morrison will be right out, doctor." Elizabeth Morrison was a silver-haired woman in her 60s who radiated competence and authority. She shook Victoria's hand with a firm grip, her expression professionally neutral. "Miss Chun, this is unexpected. Is everything all right? I just need to see my daughter." "I understand, but we have protocols. Sophia is in class right now, and disrupting her schedule without prior arrangement can be disorienting for students. We find that structured family visits work better for everyone involved." Structured visit. Victoria felt something snap inside her. Is that what my relationship with my daughter has become? A structured visit that needs to be scheduled like a dentist appointment? Dr. Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Miss Chun, I can see you're upset. Why don't we step into my office and discuss this calmly?" "I don't want to discuss it. I want to see Sophia." "No, I'm afraid I can't allow that without following proper procedure. However, I can have her brought to my office during her next free period, which begins at 3 o'clock. That's in 6 hours. You're welcome to wait here or return then." 6 hours. Victoria had flown across multiple states, canceled all her meetings, made this impulsive decision to show up and prove to her daughter that she mattered more than work, and now she was being told to wait 6 hours because of school protocol. The absurdity of it, the sheer bureaucratic indifference to what felt like the most important moment of her life, made her want to scream. Instead, she said quietly, "Fine, I'll wait, doctor." Morrison looked surprised, perhaps expecting her to leave and return later. "There's a coffee shop in town about 10 minutes away, or you're welcome to wait in the visitor's lounge. It's more comfortable than the reception area." I'll wait here," Victoria said, sitting down on one of the hard wooden benches in the hallway. "I'm not leaving." And she didn't. For 6 hours, Victoria Chun, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, sat on a bench in her daughter's school like a supplicant waiting for an audience. Faculty members passed by, students rushed between classes, the lunch rush came and went. Victoria sat, her phone buzzing constantly with messages from Jennifer, from board members, from people who needed decisions and answers. She ignored all of it. For 6 hours, she did the hardest thing she'd done in years. She simply waited. At 2:55, Dr. Morrison appeared at the end of the hallway with a young girl beside her. Victoria's heart clenched. Sophia had grown. She was taller than Victoria remembered, her body showing the first awkward signs of adolescence. Her dark hair, so like Victoria's own, was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore the school uniform, a navy blazer and plaid skirt, and carried an expensive backpack covered in pins and patches. She looked like a stranger. Sophia saw her mother and stopped walking. The expression that crossed her face was complicated, surprise, confusion, and something that might have been fear. She said something to Dr. Morrison, who nodded and gestured toward her office. Sophia walked slowly toward Victoria, her steps hesitant. "Mom?" Her voice was uncertain, as if she wasn't sure Victoria was real. "What are you doing here? Something wrong? Is it Dad?" "No, sweetie. Your father's fine. Everyone's fine." Victoria stood up, resisting the urge to pull Sophia into a hug. She could see the tension in her daughter's shoulders, the guardedness in her eyes. "I just wanted to see you. You wanted to see me." Sophia repeated the words as if they didn't make sense. "But it's Tuesday. You never visit on Tuesdays." "I know. I should have called first. But I was afraid if I scheduled it, something would come up and I'd cancel." "I was canceled, yeah." The word was flat, factual. "You do." The truth of it hit Victoria like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry. Why are you here, Mom?" Sophia's voice had taken on the careful, neutral tone of someone who had learned not to expect too much. "Did you get fired or something?" "No, maybe. I don't know." Victoria let out a shaky laugh. "I've spent the last few days realizing that I don't know much of anything except that I miss you. And I want to know you again. Really know you. Not just the version of you I see on video calls where you tell me your grades are fine and everything's okay." Sophia looked down at her shoes. "Everything is okay. Is it? Because your father told me you asked if I'd be too busy to visit for Thanksgiving. And that broke my heart, Sophia. The fact that you have to wonder if your own mother will be too busy for you. Well, you usually are." There was no anger in Sophia's voice, which somehow made it worse. Just resignation, acceptance of a reality she'd learned to live with. "I know. And that's on me. I thought I was building a better life for you, giving you opportunities, showing you that women could succeed at the highest levels. But what I was really doing was abandoning you, and I can't do it anymore." Sophia finally looked up, meeting her mother's eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know what's going to happen with my job or my career, but I know that none of it matters if I lose you. If I become so successful that my own daughter doesn't know me, then I've failed at the only thing that really counts. You're not going to lose me." Sophia's voice cracked slightly. "I'm right here." "Are you?" Victoria took a step closer. "Because when I look at you, I see a young woman I barely recognize. I don't know what music you listen to or what you want to be when you grow up or what makes you laugh anymore. I know your GPA and your test scores and which colleges you should be targeting, but I don't know you, and that's my fault. I got so caught up in being successful that I forgot to be your mom." A tear rolled down Sophia's cheek. "I thought you didn't want to be. I thought your job was more important." "Oh, sweetheart." Victoria couldn't hold back anymore. She pulled Sophia into her arms, and after a moment of resistance, her daughter melted into the embrace, her shoulders shaking with sobs. They stood in the hallway of Riverview Academy, holding each other while students passed by on their way to classes. Victoria didn't care who saw them or what they thought. She just held her daughter and whispered apologies into her hair, feeling 12 years of distance begin to close. When they finally pulled apart, both their faces were wet with tears. "Can we go somewhere?" Victoria asked. "Just the two of us? I'll talk to Dr. Morrison. I'll sign whatever forms they need. But please, let me take you out of here for the rest of the day." Sophia nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "There's a diner in town. They have good milkshakes. My friends and I go there on weekends sometimes." 20 minutes later, after a tense negotiation with Dr. Morrison involving signatures and promises that Sophia would make up her missed classes, they were sitting in a red vinyl booth at Mickey's Diner. The place was exactly what Victoria expected. Checkered floors, a jukebox in the corner, laminated menus sticky with age. It was nothing like the upscale restaurants where she usually conducted business. It was perfect. Sophia ordered a chocolate milkshake and a burger. Victoria ordered the same, not because she was hungry, but because she wanted to share this moment with her daughter, to do something normal and ordinary. When the food arrived, they ate in silence for a few minutes, both of them uncertain how to begin. Finally, Sophia spoke. "So are you really going to quit your job?" "I don't know yet. I have to make a decision by tomorrow morning. What are you leaning toward?" Victoria considered lying, giving her daughter the answer she thought she wanted to hear. But she'd promised herself honesty no matter how difficult. Part of me wants to quit, part of me wants to fight to keep it, and part of me is just exhausted from trying to figure out what the right answer is. "What does your therapist say?" Victoria looked up, surprised. "How do you know I have a therapist?" "Dad mentioned it. He says you've been under a lot of stress." Sophia took a long sip of her milkshake. "Everyone here has a therapist. It's not a big deal. Do you have a therapist?" "Dr. Patterson. She's okay, I guess. We mostly talk about the divorce and how I feel about being away from home." Sophia said it casually, but Victoria could hear the weight beneath the words. "How do you feel about it?" Sophia shrugged, a gesture that reminded Victoria painfully of herself. "I don't know, sometimes I like it here. I have friends and the classes are interesting, but sometimes I hate it. I hate that I had to leave because you and Dad couldn't figure out how to be in the same room without fighting. I hate that when I do come home, it's 2 different apartments that don't feel like home. And I really hate that I have to schedule time with my own mother like she's a busy client." Each word was a knife, precise and true. Victoria forced herself not to look away, not to make excuses. "You're right, about all of it. I've handled this terribly. Why did you even have me?" The question came out raw, unfiltered. "If your career was so important, why didn't you just not have kids?" "Because I loved." Victoria reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Sophia's hand. "The moment I found out I was pregnant with you, I loved, and when you were born, I thought I could have everything. The career, the family, the perfect balance. I thought I could be Superwoman, but you couldn't. No. Nobody can. That's the lie they sell us. That women can have it all if we just work hard enough, plan well enough, sacrifice enough. But what they don't tell you is that having it all means being split in so many directions that you're never fully present anywhere. I was trying so hard to prove I could do it that I lost sight of why I was doing it in the first place." Sophia finally met her mother's eyes. "I used to brag about you, you know. In elementary school, when other kids talked about their parents, I'd tell them my mom was a CEO. I was so proud. But then you missed my birthday and you missed my recital, and you kept missing things. And I stopped bragging because people started looking at me with pity, like I was the poor kid whose mom didn't care enough to show up. I cared. God, Sophia, I cared so much. But I was trapped in this cycle where I thought if I could just work harder, achieve more, then I'd have the security to spend more time with you. But that time never came. There was always one more deal, one more meeting, one more crisis." "So what changed?" Sophia asked. "Why now? What happened on Friday that made you suddenly realize all that?" Victoria almost told her about Marcus Webb, about following him home, about watching him with his daughter. But something stopped her. This moment wasn't about Marcus. It was about her and Sophia. "I saw what I'd become," Victoria said simply. "I saw my life from the outside and I didn't recognize it. I realized I was so focused on climbing the ladder that I didn't notice I was climbing away from everything that mattered, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend that being successful was worth being alone. You're not alone. You have Dad and me and all those important people at your company. Your father has a new family, and you're here, 3 states away. And those important people at my company would replace me in a heartbeat if I stopped being useful to them. They're trying to push me out right now, actually. Questioning my commitment, my judgment, my fitness for the job." Sophia frowned. "Because you missed one meeting?" "Because I'm a woman who dared to have a personal crisis. If I were a man, they'd call it executive stress and give me a vacation. But because I'm a woman, they call it instability and start looking for my replacement. That's not fair." "No, it's not. But that's the world we live in. And I'm tired of fighting that battle. I'm tired of proving myself to people who will never see me as their equal. I'm tired of sacrificing everything for a company that doesn't value what I've given them." "So you're going to quit?" "I'm thinking about it seriously, but I'm scared, Sophia. I've built my entire identity around this job. If I'm not the CEO of Sterling Tech, who am I?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, stirring her milkshake with her straw. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "You're my mom. That's who you are. And honestly, I'd rather have a mom who's around than a CEO who's too busy for me." The words settled over Victoria like a blanket, warm and heavy with truth. This was what she'd needed to hear, what she'd been afraid to ask. Her daughter didn't need her to be a symbol or a role model or a groundbreaking executive. She just needed her to be present. "If I quit," Victoria said slowly, working through the thought as she spoke, "I don't know what I'd do next. I've been in the corporate world for my entire adult life. Maybe you could do something you actually enjoy. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it was good for your career?" Victoria tried to remember and came up empty. "I honestly can't recall." "That's sad, Mom." "Yeah. It is." Victoria picked up a French fry, examining it like it held answers. "When I was younger, before I got serious about business school, I wanted to be a writer. Used to fill journals with stories and poems. But it wasn't practical, it wasn't a real career path, so I put it aside. You could write now." You could do whatever you want, it's not that simple. I have responsibilities, financial obligations. You're rich, Mom. Dad told me about the divorce settlement. You have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life, even if you never work again. Victoria blinked. She'd never thought of it that way. She'd been so focused on maintaining her position, her status, her relevance, that she'd forgotten that money was supposed to buy freedom, not trap you in a golden cage. You're right, she said, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. You're absolutely right. I have enough money. What I don't have is time. I don't have these years with you. Once you graduate, you'll be off to college, starting your own life. And if I keep prioritizing work over you, I'll look up one day and you'll be gone. And I'll have missed it all. I'm not gone yet, Sophia said quietly. No, you're not. Victoria reached across the table again, and this time Sophia took her hand. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to resign. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into that boardroom and tell them I'm done. And then I'm going to figure out what comes next. Maybe I'll write. Maybe I'll consult part-time. Maybe I'll do something completely different. But whatever I do, it won't be at the expense of our relationship. Not anymore. Are you sure? You've worked so hard for that job. I've worked hard for the wrong things. And I can't get back the time I've lost with you. But I can make sure I don't lose anymore. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. And for the first time in years, Victoria saw something in her daughter's eyes that she'd thought was gone forever. Hope, trust, the beginning of forgiveness. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, driving through the Connecticut countryside, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia told her about her friends, her favorite teachers, the boy in her chemistry class she thought might like her. Victoria told her about the pressure of the boardroom, the loneliness of her penthouse, the moment she'd realized her life had become unrecognizable. They laughed together. They cried together. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild the bridge that had crumbled between them. Victoria drove back to the city that evening with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Sophia had hugged her goodbye outside the school, a real hug that lasted more than the obligatory second, and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Those 4 words meant more than any business award or magazine cover ever had. The city skyline came into view as the sun set, the buildings glowing golden in the fading light. Victoria had always loved this view, had seen it as a symbol of possibility and power. Tonight it looked different. Smaller somehow, just glass and steel and concrete, impressive but ultimately empty. The real richness of life she'd discovered wasn't in corner offices and board meetings. It was in afternoon conversations over milkshakes and the feeling of your daughter's hand in yours. She didn't go back to her penthouse. Instead, she checked into a modest hotel near the airport. A place so far removed from her usual world that no one would think to look for her there. She needed one more night of clarity before she faced what was coming. She needed to be sure. Victoria ordered room service and sat on the generic hotel bed, her laptop open in front of her. She'd been ignoring her emails for almost 48 hours, an eternity in her usual world. There were hundreds of messages. Marked urgent, marked critical, marked requiring immediate attention. She scrolled through them with a detachment that would have been impossible a week ago. Budget approvals, strategy questions, vendor negotiation. Problems that had seemed monumental yesterday now felt like someone else's problems. She opened a blank document and began to write. Not her resignation letter, not yet. Just thoughts, feelings, the words she'd been keeping locked inside for years. She wrote about Sarah, Marcus Webb's wife, a woman she'd never met but somehow understood. She wrote about the choice between presence and presence, between being there and providing things. She wrote about Sophia's face in the diner and the way her daughter had looked at her with hope instead of resignation. The words poured out of her, raw and unfiltered, and she realized this was what she'd been missing. Not the writing itself, but the permission to feel deeply, to process, to be human instead of a corporate machine. By the time she finished, it was after midnight and she'd written 15 pages. She saved the document, closed her laptop, and slept better than she had in months. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear. Victoria showered, dressed in her most severe suit one last time, and drove to Sterling Tech. She arrived an hour before the board meeting, wanting time to prepare. But when she stepped off the elevator onto the 42nd floor, she found Marcus Webb polishing the glass doors of the conference room. He looked up as she approached, his expression carefully neutral. "It's Chun, you're here early. So are you. I thought your shift started at 3. They asked me to come in early today for the board, make sure everything looks perfect." He continued polishing, his movements rhythmic and precise. "Big day, I hear, you could say that." Victoria stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly needing to talk to someone who understood. "I'm going to resign." Marcus's hand paused mid-stroke, then continued. "Are you sure that's what you want?" "To see my daughter yesterday. We talked for hours. Really talked for the first time in years. And she told me she'd rather have a mother who's present than a CEO who's too busy." "She's right, that's brave of you, is it? Or is it just giving up?" Marcus set down his cloth and turned to face her fully. "There's a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up is quitting because something's hard. Letting go is releasing something that's hurting you, even if it's valuable. You're not giving up. You're choosing your daughter over a job that's killing you. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. The board won't see it that way. They'll say I couldn't handle the pressure, that I proved women aren't cut out for executive leadership. Let them say it. You'll know the truth. Your daughter will know the truth. That's what matters. Victoria felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I wanted to thank you for Friday, for being honest with me. I know it wasn't your place to counsel the CEO, but you said things I needed to hear. I just told you what I learned the hard way. Besides, you're not really the CEO anymore, are you? Not if you're resigning today. No, I suppose I'm not. The thought should have terrified her, should have filled her with regret. Instead, she felt a strange sense of freedom. What will you do? After I'm gone, I mean, will you stay on here? Marcus shrugged. For now, the pay's decent and it lets me be home for Lily in the mornings and evening, but I've been thinking about going back to teaching. Maybe in a year or two when the debt's paid off. I miss it more than I thought I would. You should do it. The world needs good teachers more than it needs clean floors. The world needs both. He smiled slightly. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding behind a mop and remembered who I used to be. That's what I'm trying to do. Remember who I used to be? Or figure out who I want to become. You'll figure it out. You seem like the type who lands on her feet, Victoria laughed. I hope you're right. She checked her watch. I should go. The board will be gathering soon. Good luck, Miss Chun, for whatever that's worth. It's worth a lot. Thank you, Mr. Webb. She hesitated, then added, and tell Lily she's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. He picked up his cloth and returned to polishing the glass, and Victoria walked away, feeling like she was leaving one world and stepping into another. The boardroom filled slowly. Wallace arrived first, looking smug and confident. Margaret came next, her expression worried. The others trickled in, taking their seats with the weary resignation of people forced to witness an execution. By 8 o'clock, everyone was present except Victoria. She waited in her office, watching the clock, letting them wonder if she would show it all. At 8-0-5, she walked into the boardroom. Every head turned toward her. She didn't sit down. She stood at the head of the table, her hands resting lightly on the back of her chair, and looked at each of them in turn. I know why we're here, she said, her voice calm and clear. You want to know if I'm committed to this company, if I can handle the pressure of this position. Friday's absence was a sign of instability or poor judgment. She paused, letting the silence build, and I'm here to tell you that you're right to question those things. Because the answer is no. Wallace leaned forward, barely containing his triumph. You're admitting you're not fit for this position? I'm admitting that I don't want it anymore. There's a difference. Victoria pulled a folded envelope from her jacket pocket and placed it on the table. This is my formal resignation, effective immediately. I've arranged for the CFO to serve as interim CEO until you can conduct a proper search. All my files are organized and accessible. Jennifer has a detailed transition plan. You'll barely notice I'm gone. Margaret stood up. Victoria, please. Don't do this. You're letting them win. No, Margaret. I'm choosing to stop fighting a battle that was never worth winning in the first place. Victoria's gaze swept the room. I've given this company 3 years of my life. 3 years where I sacrificed my marriage, my relationship with my daughter, my health, my happiness. And for what? To prove a point? To break a barrier? To be a symbol for other women? She shook her head. I'm done being a symbol. I'm done proving anything to people who will never respect me anyway. I'm choosing my daughter. I'm choosing myself. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, then I'll wear that weakness like a badge of honor. You'll regret this, Wallace said, his voice hard. You'll never work in this industry again. Everyone will know you couldn't handle it. Let them know. Victoria smiled, and it was genuine, free. I don't care anymore. That's the beautiful thing about walking away. Their opinions stop mattering. She turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Behind her, the board erupted in chaos, voices overlapping in shock and argument. She heard Margaret calling her name, heard Wallace shouting about protocol and procedures. She didn't turn back. She walked out of the boardroom, down the hallway past her soon-to-be former office, into the elevator. She pressed the button and waited, listening to her heartbeat, steady and strong. The elevator arrived. She stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the door slid closed, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal. She looked different somehow, lighter, younger, like she'd just set down a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. The lobby of Sterling Tech was busy with the morning rush, employees streaming in with their coffee cups and briefcases, ready to start another day. Victoria walked through them like a ghost, invisible in a way she'd never been before. No one recognized her without the armor of her CEO persona. No one stopped to ask questions or request decisions. She was just another person leaving the building, and the anonymity was intoxicating. She made it halfway across the lobby before Jennifer caught up with her, nearly running in her heels. Victoria, wait, please. Her assistant's face was flushed, her eyes wide with panic. What just happened up there? Wallace is saying you resigned. That can't be true. Tell me that's not true. Victoria stopped walking and turned to face the young woman who'd been her right hand for 5 years. It's true, Jennifer. I resigned. It's over. But why? You were winning. The board approved the Southeast Asia expansion. The stock price is up. Everything you've been working toward is finally coming together. Everything I've been working toward is making me miserable. I can't do it anymore. Victoria reached out and squeezed Jennifer's arm gently. You've been an incredible assistant. You deserve someone who can appreciate what you do, someone who isn't constantly on the edge of a breakdown. You'll be fine. Better than fine. You'll thrive. I don't understand. Friday you were the CEO. Today you're just walking away. What happened? Victoria smiled. I woke up, finally. She glanced toward the elevator banks where Marcus Webb was visible through the glass. moving his cart toward the service area. Sometimes you need to see what you're missing before you can find the courage for it. I was missing everything, Jennifer. My daughter doesn't know me, I don't know myself, and no amount of success is worth that price, so what are you gonna do now? I have no idea. And that's terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Victoria pulled her phone from her purse and checked the time. But first, I'm going to Connecticut. I'm going to talk to Dr. Morrison about withdrawing Sophia from Riverview. She's coming home. You're taking her out of boarding school. I'm bringing my daughter home where she belongs. We'll figure out the rest together. Victoria hugged Jennifer briefly, surprising them both. Thank you for everything. Really, you made these 3 years bearable. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. You're the best boss I've ever had. Even on your worst days, then you deserve better. Victoria pulled back, smiling through her own tears. Go find it. She walked out through the revolving doors into the cool October morning. The air felt different somehow, cleaner, like she'd been breathing recycled air for years and had forgotten what the real thing tasted like. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the massive glass tower that had been her second home. Somewhere up there, Wallace Chun was probably already planning his victory speech. Margaret Wong was probably trying to convince the other board members to fight for Victoria to stay. The machinery of corporate politics was grinding forward without her, and she felt nothing but relief. Her phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. News had traveled fast. She considered not answering, but she owed him at least a conversation. Hello, Richard. Is it true? Did you really just quit? His voice held a mix of shock and something that might have been concern. I resigned, yes. Victoria, what were you thinking? You worked your entire life for that position. I was thinking that I worked my entire life for the wrong things. I saw Sophia yesterday. We had a real conversation. Probably the first honest one we've had in years. And I realized that being CEO means nothing if I'm losing my daughter. Richard was quiet for a moment. You went to see her without telling me? Yes. And before you get angry, it was the best decision I've made in a long time. We talked, really talked. She told me things I didn't know. Things I should have known if I'd been paying attention. And she told me she'd rather have her mother present than have her mother be successful. She said that? She did. And she was right, so I'm bringing her home, Richard. I'm withdrawing her from Riverview. She's going to live with me and go to a regular school and have a normal life. Can't just make that decision unilaterally. I have joint custody, I know. I'm not trying to cut you out. I'm just trying to do what's best for our daughter. And what's best for her is to have at least one parent who's fully present. I'm hoping that can be me. Richard sighed heavily. I don't know what to say. This is a lot to process. Yesterday you were a Fortune 500 CEO. Today you're unemployed and talking about pulling our daughter out of the best school in the country. I know how it sounds, but it's the right thing, Richard. I can feel it. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm making a decision that's actually mine. Not one driven by ambition or fear or the need to prove something. What are you going to do for work? I don't know yet. I have enough money to take some time to figure it out. Maybe I'll write. Maybe I'll consult part-time. Maybe I'll do something completely different. The point is, I get to choose now. I'm not trapped anymore. You sound different, I am different, or maybe I'm finally becoming who I was always supposed to be before I got lost in the rat race. Victoria watched a young woman hurry past, talking urgently into her phone, her face tight with stress. She recognized that expression. She'd worn it herself for years. I need to go. I have a lot to do today, but I'll keep you informed about Sophia. I promise. Okay. And Victoria, I'm glad you're okay. I was worried about you. I'm better than okay, Richard. For the first time in forever, I'm actually happy. She hung up and stood for another moment on the sidewalk, letting the reality sink in. She was unemployed. She'd just walked away from one of the most powerful positions in the country. Her reputation in the business world was probably destroyed, and she felt lighter than air. Victoria pulled up Sophia's school number and called as she walked to her car. Dr. Morrison answered after 2 rings, her voice professionally wary. Miss Chun, I trust yesterday's visit went well. It did. Thank you. And that's actually why I'm calling. I need to schedule a meeting with you today to discuss withdrawing Sophia from Riverview. There was a pause. I see. May I ask what's prompted this decision? I've realized that my daughter belongs at home with me, not 3 states away at a boarding school. She's 12 years old. She should be living with her family. I understand that impulse, but Riverview provides exceptional educational opportunities. Sophia is thriving here academically, but is she thriving emotionally? Because when I talked to her yesterday, she told me about her therapist. About feeling abandoned, about wondering if her own mother would be too busy to visit for Thanksgiving. That's not thriving, Dr. Morrison. That's surviving. Another pause. I'll need to speak with Sophia's father as well. This is a significant decision. I'm working on that. But I'm her mother and I have joint custody, and I'm telling you that I want my daughter home. I'll be there by noon to start the withdrawal process. Please have the necessary paperwork ready. Miss Chun, I'll see you at noon. Dr. Morrison, thank you. Victoria ended the call before the headmaster could argue further. She was done being diplomatic, done accommodating everyone else's schedules and preferences and concerns. She was bringing her daughter home, and nothing was going to stop her. The drive to Connecticut felt faster this time, or maybe Victoria was just less anxious. She wasn't going to grovel or plead. She was going to collect her daughter and start rebuilding their life together. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, like standing on the edge of a cliff with wings you weren't sure would work. When she arrived at Riverview, Dr. Morrison was waiting in her office with a stack of forms and a disapproving expression. I've spoken with several of our board members about this. We strongly advise against withdrawing Sophia mid-semester. It could disrupt her academic progress and social development. Noted. I'd like to speak with my daughter. Please, she's in class. Then pull her out of class. This is more important than history or algebra or whatever she's studying right now, doctor. Morrison's lips pressed into a thin line, but she picked up her phone and made the call. 10 minutes later, Sophia appeared in the doorway, her expression confused and hopeful. Mom, what are you doing here again? I'm taking you home, sweetheart. Today. Right now, if that's what you want. Sophia's eyes went wide. Really? You mean it? I mean it. I resigned from my job this morning. I'm done putting work before you. If you want to come home, pack up your room. We're leaving. What about Dad? What about school? I'll handle your father, and we'll find you a good school near my apartment. Well, actually, I'm thinking we should find a new place, maybe a house with a yard, something that feels like home. We can pick it out together. Sophia looked between her mother and Dr. Morrison as if waiting for someone to tell her this was a joke. When no one did, a smile spread across her face. The first genuine smile Victoria had seen from her in years. I want to come home, then go pack. I'll handle the paperwork. Sophia ran from the office, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. Doctor Morrison shook her head slowly. I hope you know what you're doing, Ms. Chun. So do I. Dr. Morrison, so do I. Victoria picked up the first form and began to read, but even if I don't, at least I'll be doing it with my daughter by my side. And that's worth more than any career or reputation or 5-year plan. 3 months later, Victoria stood in the kitchen of their new house, a modest 2-story home in a tree-lined neighborhood 20 minutes from the city. It wasn't the penthouse. It didn't have floor-to-ceiling windows or marble countertops or a view of the skyline, but it had something better. It had Sophia's backpack thrown carelessly by the door. It had drawings on the refrigerator. It had the sound of laughter coming from upstairs where Sophia was video chatting with her new friends from the local public school. Victoria was making dinner, something she'd had to relearn how to do after years of takeout and restaurant meals. The pasta was slightly overcooked and the sauce was from a jar, but it was real food made with her own hands, and that felt like an accomplishment. Her phone sat on the counter, notifications turned off. She'd learned to ignore the constant pull of emails and messages. They could wait. Everything could wait. Mom! Dinner smells good, Sophia called from upstairs, a statement that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, not because the food was particularly good, but because her daughter was home to smell it. It'll be ready in 10 minutes, Victoria called back. She heard Sophia's footsteps on the stairs, then her daughter appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair in a messy ponytail, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt from her new school. Can Emily come over this weekend? We have a project for social studies, of course. I'll make sure we have snacks. Victoria stirred the pasta, marveling at how normal this conversation, how ordinary and precious. Thanks, Mom. Sophia grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. Oh, I got my essay back today. The one about female role models? I got an A. That's wonderful, honey. What did you write about? You. Sophia took a bite of the apple, speaking around it. I wrote about how my mom was a CEO of a big company, but her most important decision was choosing to leave it all behind for her daughter. Mrs. Patterson said it was the most honest essay she'd read all year. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Can I read it? It's in my backpack. I'll get it after dinner. Sophia paused, then added more quietly. I meant what I wrote, you know. I'm really proud of you, Mom. Not because you were a CEO, because you're here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table, talking about Sophia's day, her classes, the drama with her friends. Normal teenage things that Victoria had missed for so long. After dinner, Sophia did her homework at the table while Victoria cleaned up, and the domesticity of it all felt like a gift she'd almost thrown away. Later that evening, after Sophia had gone to bed, Victoria sat at her desk in the small room she'd converted into a home office. Her laptop was open, but instead of spreadsheets and presentation, the screen showed a document titled The Cost of Success, a memoir she'd been writing every night for the past 3 months, pouring out her story, the lessons she'd learned, the price she'd paid, and the redemption she'd found. She didn't know if anyone would ever read it. She didn't know if it was any good, but the act of writing it was healing something broken inside her. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello, Ms. Chun? This is Marcus Webb. His voice was hesitant, apologetic. I hope I'm not bothering you. I got your number from the company directory before they deleted your profile. Miss Webb. This is a surprise. Is everything all right? Everything's fine. I just wanted to reach out and thank you. I heard about something you did before you left Sterling Tech, and I needed to tell you what it meant to me. Victoria frowned, confused. I don't understand. What did I do? You don't know? Marcus sounded surprised. Before you resigned, you sent a memo to HR recommending me for a position in the company's education outreach program. You wrote that I had extensive teaching experience and would be perfect for developing curriculum for their youth mentorship initiative. They called me 2 weeks ago. I start next month. The pay is triple what I made as a janitor, and the hours mean I can be home every evening with Lily. Victoria's breath caught. She remembered now. In those final hours as CEO, while she was organizing files and preparing for her departure, she'd written that memo. She'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of everything else. But she'd wanted to do something for the man who'd helped her see clearly when everything was falling apart. I'm so glad, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You deserve it, Mr. Webb. You deserve to be doing work that matters. We both do, he said softly. So I wanted you to know that what you did, leaving that job, choosing your daughter, It inspired me. I'd been telling myself that going back to teaching was impossible, that I had to keep playing it safe. But you showed me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's killing. So I applied for this position. And when they asked me why I wanted it, I told them the truth, that I'd seen someone choose people over profit, love over ambition, and it reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. I didn't do anything special. I just finally woke up. That's everything, Miss Chun. Waking up is everything. He paused. How are you doing? How's your daughter? She's wonderful. We're wonderful, actually. We have dinner together every night. We talk, we laugh. She's making friends at her new school. I'm writing a book. It's messy and imperfect and nothing like my old life, but it's real. It's mine. That's beautiful. I'm happy for you. And I'm happy for you, Mr. Webb. Give Lily my regards. I will. And Miss Chun, thank you for seeing me as more than just the janitor, for seeing all of us as more than our job titles. After they hung up, Victoria sat in the quiet house, listening to the sounds of suburban life, a dog barking, a car passing, Sophia's soft breathing from the room down the hall. These were the sounds of a life lived in the moment, not projected forward into quarterly earnings and 5-year plan. She thought about that Friday afternoon 3 months ago when she'd followed Marcus's home, how she'd sat in her car sobbing because she'd glimpsed something she thought she'd lost forever. The connection between a parent and child, the simple joy of being welcomed home, the love that required nothing but presence. She'd found her way back to that. Not perfectly, not without stumbles and challenges, but she'd found it. And in finding it, she'd discovered something she'd forgotten in all her years of climbing and achieving and succeeding. That the most important title she'd ever hold wasn't CEO or executive or leader, it was mom. Victoria closed her laptop and walked quietly down the hall to Sophia's room. She opened the door just a crack and looked in at her sleeping daughter, her face peaceful in the moonlight streaming through the window. Sophia had one arm thrown over her head, her hair spread across the pillow, looking younger than her 12 years. Here, Victoria whispered into the darkness. I'm not going anywhere. She closed the door gently and went to her own room. As she lay in bed, she thought about all the things she'd lost when she resigned. The power, the prestige, the salary, the status. The business world had moved on without her, just as she'd predicted. Wallace Chun was the new CEO of Sterling Tech. According to the news, he was already making changes to undo everything she'd built. But she'd gained so much more than she'd lost. She'd gained her daughter back. She'd gained herself back. She'd gained mornings making breakfast and evenings helping with homework and weekends exploring their new neighborhood together. She'd gained the ability to sleep through the night without anxiety dreams about board meetings. She'd gained the freedom to write, to think, to be, and most importantly, she'd gained the knowledge that she'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the choice anyone expected, but the choice that let her look at herself in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back. The woman who'd followed a janitor home on a Friday afternoon and discovered that the life she'd been chasing was nothing compared to the life she'd been neglecting. The woman who'd learned that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is admit you were wrong and choose a different path. The woman who'd realized that success without love is just a fancy word for loneliness. Victoria Chun fell asleep that night, not as a CEO or an executive or a corporate leader. She fell asleep as a mother who'd finally come home. And in the morning, when Sophia padded into her room and climbed into bed beside her like she used to do when she was small, wrapping her arms around Victoria and whispering good morning. Mom, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice, because this right here was what mattered. Not the corner office or the board meetings or the magazine covers. Just this moment with her daughter in her arms, both of them safe and together, and finally, blessedly, home.